Good evening. I'm Michael Matt, and this is the Remnant Underground. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt, hiding out down in the catacombs. This is it, D-Day, election today, and a few of the states have come back. I'm just stopping by the catacombs myself before I head back home to be with my wife and kids and sort of watch the world blow up or something. I don't know what's going to happen. From our point of view, Donald Trump has already won. He's won some massive victories. I'm not talking about the man himself, as we've talked before. For whatever reason, this movement has galvanized and has sort of exploded. And we've seen some things happen over the past 18 months that I never thought I would see. The Remnant's been trying to expose some of this for 50 years, and we've done so on lower levels, but I can't believe some of the things that we heard on mainstream media coming out of Donald Trump's mouth with respect to the big business, big bank, big government, big Hollywood, big media. That's fantastic that that's happened. So I have a feeling God in his providence is blessing the people who are willing now to stand up and to speak out against this rot. And that includes to be defensive of our own borders and our own country and so forth. There's every reason to be positive. And as we've said down here and elsewhere so many times, until and unless the Catholic Church comes back to sanity, we can't expect any true, absolute 100% restoration of all that is truthful and good and beautiful in the world. And right now we see Pope Francis is another thing that Donald Trump, the phenomenon of Donald Trump, has exposed. The fact that even the Vatican is in the tank for the far left liberals, the Democrats in this country. We see Pope Francis more or less stumping for Hillary Clinton 2 nights before the election by talking against the walls and in favor of bridges and all of this. And really what's come out through WikiLeaks and elsewhere now is this whole idea that Francis and the radical left progressive modernists in the Vatican are in the tank with people like George Soros and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in the United Nations. So again, this has all been exposed. The curtain has been pulled down. We see the little Wizard of Oz guy now over there pulling his strings. And in that sense, I think we can all take a lot of hope and solace, and we can count on that strong opposition of people who actually have woken up to stay in a position to be contra New World Order, which I think is a wonderful thing. For tonight's show, one of the big things that Donald Trump distinguished himself with was this idea of building a wall and of shoring up our borders and trying to keep out Muslim extremists from our country. Perfectly reasonable position. We had a chance yesterday to sit down with Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch. I would say that Robert is one of the premier experts on the question of the religion of Islam and the Quran and so forth. And he's been firing away at this for a long time, that if we continue to let these people come into this country and try to set up Sharia law, we're going to see an America very different than the one in which we all grew up. Whatever America's problems are, the reality it's going to get a lot worse if something doesn't happen here. And that's the reason a lot of people supported the Trump-Pence ticket, was to try to defend the borders. So anyway, I think it's going to be interesting, and I think there's going to be a hopeful aspect of this as well, because I knew what Robert Spencer was about as far as the Jihad Watch website and so forth. But what we found out in the course of our interview, and I think you'll find this interesting, is that Robert is at heart, I don't think he calls himself, I know he doesn't call himself a traditionalist, he's a Catholic, of course, but as we conversed and talked and got to know one another, I found that he's another one of these people who was really woken up to what's going on in the Catholic Church. So take a look at this interview with Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for Remnant TV. We are in the basement of the Argument of the Month, preparing for a big debate tonight that actually will not be a debate, but we are honored to welcome our guest debater, speaker, Robert Spencer from Jihad Watch. Robert, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very interested because we tried to get a number of people who make the claim that Islam absolutely is a religion of peace to come in and debate you, and we failed. Why do you think that is? Why did we fail to bring in the experts in this debate?
I think that there are 2 reasons for that. One is that Islam is not a religion of peace, and even they know it. That the people who are fronting this idea are doing so to further various agendas that they wish to see out in the public sphere. But they know that when it comes down to the way that I look into the question by consulting the Quran and Islamic teaching, that there really is an established, strong doctrine and tradition of violence that is well delineated in Islamic jurisprudence. And so they know they don't have a leg to stand on. And second, because in the church today, while dialogue is very much prized and is often touted by bishops and others as being a very important thing for Christians to engage in, that dialogue is generally only acceptable if accepted positions are put forward. And if politically incorrect positions are put forward, then they're not interested in dialogue anymore.
What is the purpose, as long as you bring it up, what is the purpose of dialogue? Do you have any idea? Ultimately, what's the end game of the movement to dialogue?
Well, what we're told is that if we engage in dialogue with those with whom we disagree, although here again, it's not really with those with whom they disagree, it's only with those with whom they agree, that they actually engage in dialogue. But the theory is that if they engage in dialogue, that we will come to an understanding of our differences such that we will be able to proceed together in harmony, if not in full agreement, and all the conflicts between the two groups that our positions supposedly represent will vanish. Mm-hmm. And that's the theory of it. But in practice, this has never worked and never will work.
So tell me something about Jihad Watch, because as far as I understand, it certainly is you are one of the foremost experts on the question of Islam, the religion. And I know a lot of people say of you, well, you must have some sort of personal angst against these people. This is a hateful thing to do. You're just after them personally. But in connection with this idea of dialogue, I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that dialogue is going to be really challenged with these people who really are not interested in dialoguing with us, with Christians, in any sense other than either to bring us into their religion or to get rid of us in another way. Do you hate Islam? Do you hate the followers of Muhammad?
I certainly don't hate Muslims. There are aspects of Islam that I think any decent person not hate but should oppose and should be clear-eyed and clear-eyed about and honest about. That there are aspects of Islam mandating violence, mandating the oppression of women, mandating the warfare against and subjugation of non-Muslims, honor killing, female genital mutilation, so many things that are hateful in themselves and that somebody who loves the good should not favor. And so in terms of that, certainly I don't look with favor upon those things. But that is not the same thing as some sort of an animus toward any individual Muslim, and certainly not toward Muslims in the aggregate. The individual is one thing, and the belief system is another. The fact that any individual person is a Muslim doesn't actually tell one anything about what he necessarily believes and doesn't believe, because every individual's approach to his religious tradition is going to be different. Yeah. And there's some people who are very knowledgeable and very fervent, and other people who are not knowledgeable or not fervent or both, but still identify as being a member of the religion. And so you cannot generalize from the fact that Islam teaches things that are, in an objective sense, hateful and violent and so on, that any individual Muslim is hateful and violent. He might be a wonderful person. After all, if one God created us all, then every human soul has value, and any individual, no matter what his religious tradition, may be a wonderful person. But that does not change the content of that religious tradition.
Is there something to arise or cause concern in someone like you who studied this question so much? Let's use for a moment the Christian man. The Christian man is taught to emulate Jesus Christ, the one who turned the other cheek, and that tells us to turn the other cheek, to love our enemies and so forth. If we want to be like Jesus, that's what we need to do. So does the cause of concern for you then, with respect to Muslims, does it come in that in emulating the Prophet Muhammad, this is sort of built into that? If you really do live up to him, you're going to be advocating violence and some things that are very dangerous.
Absolutely. Look, chapter 33, verse 21 of the Quran is quite clear that Muhammad is the excellent example, the model to be emulated. If Muhammad did it, it's right, it's good, it is to be imitated. And Islamic tradition is voluminous in terms of what it tells us about Muhammad. And he was a warlord. He did consummate his marriage with a 9-year-old girl when he was 54. He did order his enemies assassinated if they insulted him. All these things are in the Islamic texts about what Muhammad was like. These things are not the creation of hateful Islamophobes, so-called. Mm-hmm. These things are in Islamic texts and teachings. So what are we supposed to do about that? We understand then that when Muslims are violent and do kill people, behead people, and have this will to conquer and so on, these things are in imitation of Muhammad. It's quite clear. It's not hard. This is not rocket science. The Sirat Rasulullah, the first biography of Muhammad, the biography of the Prophet of Allah by Ibn Ishaq, was written in the middle of the 8th century, and it is the first biography of Muhammad, the sole biography upon which every other biography depends. There is also an abundance of material in the Hadith, the reports about Muhammad's words and deeds, about what he favored, what he taught, and he taught this warfare against unbelievers. So when Muslims behave in this way, they can and do point to the texts and teachings of Islam to justify what they're doing and to make recruits among peaceful Muslims. And they do make those kinds of recruits on the basis of appealing to Muhammad. Anybody who reads this material will see that. The problem is that most Westerners don't read the Sirat Rasulullah or the Hadith, and so they don't know what's in it, and they assume that Muhammad was some sort of a figure like Gandhi or like Jesus, and taught peace because that's what religious figures do. But this is simply a prejudice or a superstition that is not based on fact.
Let me bring you maybe a little too far afield from what the topic is at tonight's debate, but I want to talk for a moment about the Catholic Church, because one of the reasons I think that there are so many people who have a faulty understanding, people you just referred to, of Muhammad as this peaceful, religious figure and so forth. One of the reasons seems to be that they're getting that from on high in the Catholic Church starting in 1965. You have two documents, Nostra Aetate, you have Lumen Gentium, I think, where you have this idea that we all worship the same God and so forth. And that has been filtering down through the ranks until now. We have most of the Catholic world is in agreement on this, that we all are sort of together in this, and that there's no conflict, and that Islam is indeed a religion of peace. That's a very difficult thing to overcome, and certainly with Pope Francis himself. Now we're seeing it right from the top. First part A of the question, what can we do about that? Or maybe let's make A, why do you think this is so? Why has the Catholic Church gone in this direction? And B, what do you think can be done about it?
Well, the Catholic Church with Vatican II committed itself to an irenic path of trying to emphasize, when it came to other religions and other sects of Christianity, that we would emphasize what we have in common rather than our differences, which doesn't really cancel out the differences or make them go away. But it makes the texts of Vatican II uniformly positive about other religions. Now, as decades have gone by, and a whole generation of Catholics has grown up with these texts, I think that the idea has taken root that that's really all there is to say about these other religions, and that everything is positive about them, and that particularly when Vatican II, when Lumen Gentium, or I believe it is Nostra Aetate, is the one that says that Catholics and Muslims worship both worship the same God, the one God, that this somehow precludes any critical eye toward Islam's doctrines of violence and supremacism, when there's really no reasonable case that can be made for that. After all, the Church has been in polemics with Protestants for 450 years, and with various other groups for longer. And you could argue that Protestants, Jews, so on, worship the same God, and yet this has never precluded any kind of theological debate or discussion or evangelization. Why is it different in this case? And yet, I think that the answer to the other part of your question is, we have to simply recover a sense of the true Catholic teaching, and not these caricatures that have taken root to such a tremendous degree over the last few decades, and the idea that Vatican II is some kind of, as I believe Pope Benedict XVI said, some sort of super council that cancels out all the Catholic tradition, and that the Pope is some sort of divine oracle in which everything he says is true as if it were a word from God, instead of the very carefully delineated limits on his authority that are found in the actual conciliar text.
What do you think with respect to someone like Pope Francis? Is he deceived, or is he just overly optimistic?
Well, there was information that came out about George Soros and his group spending several $100,000 to influence Pope Francis and to try to turn the church in a direction that favored his agenda. And so if that is true, then, and I think it certainly needs to be evaluated very carefully, it may be that Francis is being influenced wittingly or not by forces that do not have his best interests or the church's best interests at heart. He seems to be a well-meaning individual. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I think he's uninformed in the sense that when he says that true Islam and the proper understanding of the Quran reject every form of violence, that's just flatly false. And no Catholic need to adhere to that because it's not authoritative teaching. The Pope has no charism of infallibility or even any authority to speak about the teachings of a non-Christian religion. His authority is very carefully laid out in terms of his ability to determine what is Christian doctrine and what is not, but not to say what Islam is and what it isn't, or what Buddhism is or isn't, or Hinduism. And so it's simply a false statement. And for whatever reason that he said it, it has to be respectfully rejected and amended such that it loses its power and he stops misleading Catholics in this way.
But we had Francis effectively stumping for Hillary Clinton in that he went after this idea of a wall. He was talking about building bridges, not walls. So it seems to me that he's actually helping this sort of disoriented hierarchy, I should say, of the Catholic Church on this question is facilitating a movement to sort of knock down walls and borders and to bring a situation that I wonder if it can be contained.
Yeah, the problem is that in speaking about immigration in this way, the Pope is behaving as if one's understanding of how the Church and the Western world and the United States in particular should behave toward Muslim migrants and the mass Muslim migrant inundation of the last couple of years is somehow a matter of obedience as a Catholic, whereas the Church's stance on abortion, which is based on the Fifth Commandment, seems to be negotiable as far as he's concerned, because if he's going to be attacking Donald Trump and not Hillary, then he's essentially saying that Catholics should vote for a candidate who is in favor of abortion versus one whose stance on immigration he dislikes. And this is a problem I find in the Church's contemporary stance on Islam in general, that these matters of prudential judgment and matters of opinion, which is all that they are elevated to the status of dogma, while the genuine dogmas of the Church are ignored. And the Church seems to be more interested in enforcing these opinions rather than in enforcing its own teachings within the Catholic realm.
And it's ironic because it seems, historically speaking, that whether we're talking about the gates of Vienna or Malta, the Catholic Church was the one force that seemed to be able to contain this, and now with the Catholic Church beginning to really change her orientation vis-a-vis Islam, I don't know what's going to stop this movement of Islam to force Sharia law on various parts of countries in Europe and here in the States.
So there will be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Muslim migrants all over the United States. And that's going to change the U.S. irrevocably, because you not only have the possibility, the likelihood that Islamic jihadis will come in among the refugees, but you also have the fact that the refugees represent the first immigrant group in the history of the United States to come here with a ready-made model of society and governance that they consider superior to the one of the country to which they're coming, and that they're determined to place the one with the other, because Sharia, Islamic law, is considered to be the immutable law of Allah that is superior to all human law. And so you're going to have some, not all, but some of the migrants coming in and thinking we need to bring Sharia to the United States. That is a system that denies the freedom of speech, denies the equality of rights of women, denies the equality of rights of non-Muslims, mandates stoning, amputation, all sorts of draconian punishments for various offenses. This is something completely incompatible with constitutional freedoms in numerous ways. It's going to cause immeasurable civil strife in the United States.
Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch, thank you so much. I know you have a big debate tonight, so good luck on that, and we'll talk to you afterwards. Thanks very much.
If you want to see the whole debate that we had at the Argument of the Month with Mr. Spencer, go over to aotmclub.com and you can buy that talk for $1. But as I say, I'd like to get him down here in the underground soon. And so this provides a reminder for us. Please don't forget about our 50 Cent Club. I think there's going to be some buttons up here somewhere that you can just click on and go right to our website, 50 Cent. That's great. 50 Cent per episode would be fantastic. So help us out if you can, and we'll see you next week. I'm Michael Matt.